Well, a point of peacekeeping is self-evident, to keep the peace and save lives. But in Bosnia, back in 1995, that concept failed miserably. The UN declared the town of Srebrenica safe, but it was anything but. About 8,000 Muslim men and boys were massacred. And today, in an historic ruling, a Dutch court held some of those UN peacekeepers responsible. Stuart Greer has the story.
Almost 20 years later, and the remains of the boys and men murdered in Srebrenica are still being identified and buried. Nearly 8,000 were systematically executed by Bosnian Serb troops. It was mass murder on a scale not seen in Europe since the Nazis in World War II. But the families of the victims and survivors have always believed it could have been prevented and have taken the Dutch government to court. 19 years ago, I walked through this gate looking to be saved by the Dutch and the UN, she says, because they promised to protect us. In July 1995, with the Bosnian War at its bloody climax, the UN declared Srebrenica a safe haven. Thousands of ethnic Muslim refugees flooded into a compound run by Dutch peacekeepers. But surrounded by General Ratko Mladic's soldiers, they handed the civilians over to the feared commander when he reassured them they would be safe. A Dutch court has ruled the peacekeepers should have known the men and boys would have been killed after reports of Serb atrocities. The Dutch state is liable for 300 deaths because it wrongfully sent them away, says the lawyer for the families. But it's not liable for the bulk of the 8,000 victims, which has angered survivors. Still, the ruling sets a historic precedent, even though the Dutch were in an impossible position. The UN had sent far too few peacekeepers to properly protect civilians.
It's had a dramatic impact on nations volunteering for peacekeeping missions because of the incompetence shown by the United Nations in conducting operations in the 90s. Need I remind you of Rwanda and Somalia?
General Ratko Mladic is currently on trial, facing charges of genocide for ordering the Srebrenica massacre. But after today's historic ruling, it's not just the perpetrators of war crimes that will be held to account, but also those who don't do enough to stop them. Stuart Greer, Global News, London.